And we go downhill from here, so it's okay. Okay, 3, 2. And now we're here with new friend of the show, Rich Davis. Welcome to Earth Station One, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Excited to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we're sort of on the tail end of our countdown to Halloween, so I'm glad that you could join us because obviously with your Dracula books that are been so successful, I wanted to have the opportunity to talk to you. So I'm glad that you're joining us. For those people who may not be familiar with you and your work, just tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure. My name's Rich Davis. I am the writer and creator of both Cult of Dracula and Rise of Dracula, out in fine comic book stores everywhere from Source Point Press. We have a third volume called Reign of Dracula, which comes out sometime next year, also from Source Point Press. And then I have a new book coming down the pike from Red 5 Comics called Prometheus in Chains. And that is a play on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein set in the post-World War II atomic age.
Ooh, exciting. So a
Yeah, I'm
little bit
really
of
excited about
Dracula, a
that
little
one.
bit of Frankenstein.
I may have a little bit of an obsession with the Victorian era of horror.
What let's start there. How have you been interested in sort of horror icons for a while?
Yeah, I know everybody who probably says this, but I am a huge horror fan, obviously. And I've been a fan ever since I was a small child. And I'm probably the easiest person on the planet to scare because I want to be scared so badly. And like I used to sit and I would hide behind my mom and dad's. They had this big black leather couch in the living room, and I would hide behind it and like peek around the corner to watch Scooby Doo, and it would scare the crap out of me. And mom would be like, "I'm never gonna let you watch that again." I'm like, please, please, mom, don't want to watch Scooby Doo. Yeah, but I loved it, and so that graduated into just loving horror in general. And there used to be this TV station out of Nashville, Tennessee. I lived in Middle Tennessee growing up, and it was a little TV station. And on Friday nights, like at 11, 12 o'clock, they would do these classic horror movies. Like that's where I mostly Hammer films, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would stay up late and watch those. And my dad knew I was sneaking out of bed, but it was cool to me because I didn't know that he knew. And from there, those characters, they've always just they've stuck with me, beyond just Dracula and Frankenstein. I mean, you start talking about Dorian Gray and all of these just wonderful iconic characters that have inspired the horror fiction that we consume these days. That's really where it all started. And so yeah, it's always been a fascination with that Victorian era of horror.
And on the other side of that, have you always been interested in comics as a medium?
Not actually. When I was a little kid, all I wanted to do was play video games and play baseball. If you would have asked me at 8 years old what I was going to do with my life, I would have told you I was going to play. I was going to play baseball for the Atlanta Braves, and I even picked out the house I was going to buy my mom when I signed my first contract. So
Oh,
I
that's sweet.
I really didn't get into comics until I was probably 10 or 11. I didn't like to read anything as a kid. So mom and dad were very smart and they tricked me. They knew I loved to play baseball and they knew that I was very competitive and I loved to win things. So they started promising me, if I did well in my game or if I did well in school, made straight A's or whatever, they would take me over to Bob's Collector's Den, which was in the next town over. And they'd let me spend the day just buying whatever comics I wanted. And, I loved them. But in my little kid brain, I didn't realize that comic books were reading.
Sure.
And so I loved them, fell in love with the X-Men and Spider-Man and Captain America, more X-Men. I think there were like 13 titles that I was buying back then. And, from there, I became an avid reader. I graduated from comics into reading more traditional novels. I discovered Stephen King and Anne Rice way too young to discover those authors, but I read them anyway and I loved them. My parents never censored anything for me. I could read what I wanted, I could watch what I wanted, I could play whatever games I wanted, and they would just sit down with me and they'd say, okay, You know this isn't real, right? Of course, Mom. You know you can't cut somebody up with a chainsaw, right? Absolutely, Mom. Will you shut up so I can watch the movie, please? And that was pretty much a normal conversation that we would have on a Saturday night when I was growing up wanting to watch horror movies or whatever.
And when did the urge or the bug to actually create stories start?
Mom says I've always been a storyteller. When I was a kid, she tells me stories that I would, entertain her friends by just making crazy stuff up. And, my stories, I mean, sure, a lot of kids do that, but apparently my stories kind of made sense. So mom and dad they encouraged me a lot to pursue my creativity. I didn't listen. I decided I thought I don't want to do that. Maybe I'll be a lawyer or something. And then I didn't want to do that. So I was like, maybe I'll go into journalism. I didn't really want to do that. Maybe I'll be a big time famous actor and do theater. That didn't work out. I did own a theater for 10 years, but I kind of bounced around, never really thinking that I could actually make a living out of writing. And I'm very glad that that I've been able to. I started writing plays and screenplays, and then that just kind of graduated into comics. And I don't know how long they're going to let me keep doing this, but I'm going to stay at the party until they kick me out.
So where does so how did the combination of you writing your because your take on Dracula is pretty unique, I think.
I think so.
I think it's fair to say. So what was the genesis behind all of that?
So when I started out, two things contributed to taking Dracula into the direction that I did. One was a very sobering moment when my friend Georges Genti, he's working on The Mandalorian now, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He's a well-known artist, and he happens to be a friend.
Great
And
guy.
so yeah, I love Georges, and he kind of sobered me up a little bit because I gave him my script, asked him to read it, and he was like, he's like, Rich, it's a good story. I love your dialogue. Your dialogue's probably the strength of the book. But when you get down to it, it's really just another vampire story. And I was like, wow, no one's ever said that to me before. And so I started taking a real hard look at it. And what I knew going in was that I did not want to tell another story set in Victorian London where a creepy Eastern European dude comes and, tries to take over the city or whatever. There's absolutely nothing I can do with that story. It's been done. It's been done a million times. It's been done very well. It's been done very poorly. It's been spoofed by Leslie Nielsen. There's nothing I can add to that story, but I still wanted to tell a Dracula story. So I started researching because I'm a very, very heavy researcher. I research everything that I write to an obscene degree. But I started researching not only what Stoker said in Dracula, but what he intended to say. What was he saying in letters that he wrote to members of parliament and letters that he wrote to his friends and family? What were his themes? What did he want to explore? And so I started thinking about how we could play with his theme of the other, because that's the biggest theme in Dracula, that fear of the other. And I was trying to think of a way in modern context what that other might be. So I dove kind of down a rabbit hole of researching mythologies from around the world, folk tales, creepy children's songs, all that stuff. And I started noticing that there's a very common figure that appears across all of human history and all of human cultures. It's almost always a woman. She's outcast. She doesn't fit in. She's forced to live in the shadows and feed off of the innocence or sometimes the literal life force of children. And that sounded a hell of a lot like a vampire to me. So I came up with the concept, what if Dracula was a title rather than a name? So it's like king or queen or emperor or whatever. And what if every one of those figures throughout all of human history, and no matter where on the world they were observed, what if they were Dracula, just interpreted differently by the people who observed her? So that opened up this whole new world of storytelling opportunities, because suddenly I could go anywhere in any time. I could draw from any culture. And so I boiled it all the way back to Lilith and the Garden of Eden, and not just the Judeo-Christian version of Lilith, but I also pulled in the Islamic and the Assyrian version, because there's so many crossovers with these characters. These characters appear in so many different cultures, so it became really fun to explore them in that way. And then I decided to drop Charles Manson in the middle of it and make it a kind of a 70s grindhouse movie, because why not?
Well, you mentioned it. I mean, the fact that you mentioned that you kind of grew up on Hammer horror, I think that's a big influence on these books as well. I can
Absolutely.
I definitely feel that vibe.
Yeah, I think the best compliment I got in any of the reviews out there was someone compared it to a love story, or excuse me, a love letter to the grindhouse golden age of horror. And I was like, that one's getting framed and going on my office wall, because that's a good quote.
And what's really amazing, and without getting into too many spoilers, because I want people to check it out if they haven't already, but whereas Cult of Dracula is really like, okay, this is a unique take on this figure, this iconic figure, and it plays out. But then when you get to Rise of Dracula, man, you just put the pedal to the metal and go full out, you just take it in places that it's like, okay, I'm gonna take this as far as it can go.
Absolutely.
And it's so exciting and refreshing. I can't wait to check out Rain, by the way. So yeah, I'm just sort of wondering, like, where does it end? And not to get into spoilers, but it's like, where you got the concept to just go that far with the concept.
All right. So I really like you guys. Okay. So I'm gonna give you I'm gonna give you a spoiler that no one else has had. I've never said this on another podcast. So this is just for you guys and your listeners. Okay. You ready for it? You sure you're ready?
I'm sitting down.
I'm going to tell you how it ends.
So excited.
I'm going to tell you how this Dracula saga ends. Okay.
Oh no.
It ends on the last page.
Oh
wow!
I didn't see that coming. I didn't see it coming.
I would
totally didn't see that coming.
I would never have expected that.
No.
Is this what did you have it in mind as a trilogy to begin with, or is it even more ongoing than that?
So originally I had it in mind as a trilogy. And so when I was shopping it around the publishers, I would tell them, it's like, okay, this book either has to be 1 volume of 6 issues, or it has to be 3 volumes of 6 issues. It can't be 2, it can't be 4. It's got to be 1 or 3. Because I had this story mapped out in my head of where I was going to go. And, Cult of Dracula Volume 1 was written in such a way that if you only read Cult and that was where the story ends, you get a successful beginning, middle, and an end of a story. But we also set up what would happen in a Volume 2 and eventually a Volume 3. So I had always hoped that I was going to get to tell the entire story. And thankfully, SourcePoint Press was behind me. They were very supportive, and they've allowed me to do that. And since Cult and Rise have been so successful and our hopes are so high for Reign of Dracula, we've been discussing ways that we can kind of broaden this universe and tell some more stories. So I'm working now in the very early stages of a book called World of Dracula. And with World of Dracula, it'll be a series of one-shot books, 24 to 32 pages each. And we will visit Dracula at a different time in history with a different culture. So issue 1 might be the Native American deer woman. And then issue 2 might be a story about Medusa. And then another story in volume 3 might be about Joragumo from Japan. So there's all these different opportunities to explore Dracula from different perspectives and, kind of flesh out the mythos even more than it already has been.
Wow. Yeah. And like you said, it has been quite successful for you. I don't know. Was it it must have been just an amazing feeling, like seeing it be so, because it caught on pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, man.
It took fire.
Yeah, it's, I still don't believe it. Imposter syndrome is real in this industry. And I think I have it on steroids. I was joking with Becky Fuller and Shannon Mayer a little while ago. I was like, you know what? I feel like I've snuck in this really cool party, and I'm waiting on the bouncer to tap me on the shoulder and say, dude, get out, you don't belong. And I've felt that way now for 2 years. I've got 2 exceptionally successful books out there, with more on the way, and I still don't feel like I belong amongst real comics creators, but so it's a wild and very humbling feeling, like to go to a convention. So okay, quick fun story. My first MegaCon last year. MegaCon's huge. I don't know. It's in Orlando. I don't know if you've ever been, but it's a giant complex. And I got lost on my way there the first day, and I ended up going into the complete wrong building. So I show up on the con floor about, I don't know, 2 hours late. And I'm walking up. I've got my coffee because by this time I had to have coffee because I didn't know where I was. And I'm walking in, and I see Source Point Press's booth over there because they've got this really cool, tall red tower that rotates. And it's like, oh wow, that's neat. And I'm looking, and I'm like, oh wow, there's a good crowd here. That's really cool. Good for them. And then I get like close enough that I'm like, oh shit, they're waiting for me. Like, these people have been waiting like 2 hours for me to come over there. And I mean, it was such a weird feeling. And I apologized profusely about, told them how late I was and I was lost. But they were really cool people. And it just blew my mind that there were people who not only have read my books and enjoyed them, but enjoyed them so much that they actually wanted to come and meet me and talk about those books. So that's been a really, really cool feeling. And I hope that I'm able to live up to what those fans, for lack of a better term, what they expect of me. It still feels weird to say that I have fans, but I do. So it's I just, every day when I go to these things, I really do. I want to make sure that I'm giving the people. If you took time to come and see me and to buy my book and to read my book and to talk to me, then I want to give you a wonderful experience, because the least I can do is give you a minute of my time just to talk to you and hear you out. So that's been a really cool experience.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Awesome. Before we get to the Geek Seat, you sort of tease that you have plans for Mary Shelley's creation.
Yes.
Any sort of sneak peek on that before?
Yeah. So just like with Dracula, I took Shelley's original story and kind of boiled it down to its original themes and set it in a completely new way. Because again, I don't want to tell another story in Victorian London. What can I do with that tale? Nothing. So what I decided to do, I was researching, I really don't know why I was reading about this, but I was reading about the Manhattan Project and the scientists that fled Germany to help the Allies develop the atomic bomb to defeat the Nazis. And I started thinking to myself, what if Victor Frankenstein was one of those scientists? And what if he fled to the US and he worked with Oppenheimer and Fermi and Eisenhower? Einstein, excuse me, not Eisenhower.
Sure.
He would have been a little bit later. But what if he worked with these people in developing the bomb? And I was like, okay, that's cool. So the bomb becomes a metaphor for the creature. Victor's afraid that it could destroy the world. And then I was like, yeah, that's kind of cool, but not really cool. So what else could I do with it? And so I decided to bring Elizabeth Frankenstein into the story a bit more. She oftentimes gets overlooked in the adaptations, I think. And so I decided, well, what if, because there were women who worked on the Manhattan Project, and I was like, well, what if Elizabeth was also a brilliant scientist? And what if she fled Germany, not just because she's in love with Victor, but because she actually wanted to contribute to what would eventually bring the Reich to its knees? And then I was thinking, well, what if, we need something else that is that can serve as Victor's creature, this monster that's hounding him. And I was like, well, what if we're working on nuclear power? What if Elizabeth gets cancer and Victor has to watch her die, and then his grief becomes the creature? And as a person who suffers from PTSD myself, my wife passed away in 2020. This became a very personal story, and it's been absolute hell to write it. My therapist is earning her keep, talking me through writing this script. I mean, it's been devastating, but the end result, I think, is something that I can be proud of, that maybe it can help somebody else out there who's suffering from PTSD or depression, and to see, that other people are dealing with those same things. So Prometheus in Chains, it'll be out next May from Red 5 Comics. We are working on getting approval to have a free comic book day edition of it, which is incredibly cool to me, to think that I would have a book out on free comic book day. It's mind blowing. So working with Jordan Dorenzo on the art, he's brilliant. Dave Lentz and Alex Zeef, my creative team from Cult and Rise of Dracula, came back to do colors and letters. So we kind of got the band back together and added Jordan in to play bass.
Nice. Well, now that we've talked about what you've been working on and what you've worked on, let's find out where your passions lie. Mike, I think he's about as ready as he can be.
I guess so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, he's used
Roll
to
them
working
dice.
with he's used to working with horrors, so we might as well see what Rich is ready for.
Did you say horror or whores? Because I'm not sure which you said.
Well,
and I was like, how do you know I work with whores?
Well,
you don't know
see
me.
you see that little camera above you? No.
Oh, that's what that is.
It watches everything. So our first question for you, Rich, what was your favorite Geek Out moment?
Being a guest at Dragon Con. I've been attending Dragon Con since probably either 2005, 2006. I don't really remember exactly my first con. But I went as an attendee. I covered Dragon Con as a reporter for 980 WAAV in Wilmington, North Carolina. And a couple years after that, Dan Carroll was kind enough to invite me to work on media relations. And my responsibility was to manage all of the interview requests for Comics and Pop Art Alley. So if a reporter wanted to speak to Teenie Howard or John Romita, they had to go through me to set that up. And so to be invited to come to Dragon Con as a creator, as an artist, as a guest, it was just such a mind-blowingly cool experience. I mean, I vividly remember walking up there to Comics and Pop Art Alley and seeing my booth with my name on it, and I cried. I mean, it was just such a cool, rewarding experience, and Dragon Con will always be home for me. I love the people. I love the con. There's just nothing like it. And I've been to a lot of conventions now, and nothing comes close to Dragon Con. And that one moment of realizing that, holy crap, I am a guest at Dragon Con. That by far was my favorite Geek Out moment.
Awesome.
Oh, that's pretty awesome.
It's our favorite show as well.
Nice. Hopefully I'll see you there again next year.
Absolutely.
You'll see one of us.
Right.
That's true. That's true.
That's true. No. What was your most disappointing Geek Out moment?
It's kind of in the same vein, but again, when like Icarus, when you fly too high, you need somebody to pull you back down. So
sure.
So when Reed Pop indirectly told me that I wasn't successful enough to be invited as a guest to their conventions, that was probably my least favorite Geek Out moment.
Ouch.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah.
Is right.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
You go from this super Mount Everest high to this Death Valley low. But then Reed Pop did turn around and invite me to a couple of conventions anyway. So as Kobe would say, scoreboard.
Yeah.
There you go. What geeks you out the most?
I would say meeting my fellow fans. I love going to conventions and talking to nerdy people who love nerdy things. And then, because my mind gets expanded and I get exposed to so many different IPs and areas of nerddom that I would never think to try. For example, at Dragon Con, a friend of mine was really big into anime. And I'm not. I've never been into it because in my mind, anime was always, Naruto and Pokemon and all that stuff. But my friend told me, like, no, there's a whole new world of anime out there. And he introduced me to a show on Netflix called Trece. It's a Philippine horror anime, and I fell in love with it. It's brilliant. And then from there, I watched Castlevania, and then I watched Blood of Zeus, and now I've watched so many anime that I can't even count them. So meeting fellow nerds like that at conventions, that's probably my biggest geek out moment. That I just absolutely love it. I never walk away from one of those encounters empty handed.
That is
Cool.
awesome. That is really, really awesome. What should your geek off though?
Gatekeepers.
Really?
Absolutely. There is no place for them. And I know that sounds like I'm being gatekeepery because I am, but you know, there's
do as
just
I
no,
say, not as I do.
I do. Yeah, exactly. But no, I mean, being a nerd, we don't need people telling us, hey, you're cool, you can come into the party, or hey, you can come enjoy this thing. You know, I don't care if you've just picked up comic books, you know, after watching Endgame, or whether you came out of your mother's womb with Action Comics #1 in your hand. I don't care. I'm just glad that you're part of this hobby that I love so much. And my attitude is always, when someone new comes into the hobby, I want to help them find more things. You know, I notice, and sadly, it's most of the time it's guys doing this, but you know, a woman would come in and say, you know, it's like, oh, you know, I'm a Captain America fan, and then you know somebody sits there and grills them to death, and you know, and makes them feel bad because they don't know what Cap said on the third panel of page 25 in Captain America 102. You know, I mean, why do you need that? Why can't we just welcome people and celebrate the fact that holy shit, we both love nerdy stuff? You know,
Mhm.
why do we need to ostracize and make people feel bad and push them out of the hobby? We should be welcoming more people in, not forcing people out.
It's not just a club. It's open to everybody.
Absolutely, man. And
No,
the club gets better the more people we have involved. You know,
it evolves and becomes something that you don't even expect it to be, which is
absolutely.
pretty awesome.
I agree.
Not that I'm trying to answer your question for you or
No,
anything.
you actually said it far more concisely than I did, because you know I can why use two words when 1,000 will do.
See, what fictional character would you like to meet the most?
Lestat de Liancourt.
Really?
Yes. I again, I discovered Anne Rice way too young. I was probably maybe 12
Oh
when I
wow.
first discovered Anne Rice. And I didn't know half of what I was reading. I didn't understand it. I didn't know what the hell she was talking about. I just knew I loved it. And Lestat has always been a character that just absolutely fascinates me, because he essentially he's kind of like Prometheus. He literally does steal fire from the gods, because you know when he's made a vampire, he's just really another vampire, you know, in the 1700 or 1600s of France. But he goes and he finds the original vampires and he sucks their blood and makes himself, you know, a god essentially. So he's a fascinating character and a brilliant libertine, which is something I've come to understand more about him the more I've gone back and to read the books. So yeah, I think Lestat would be a fascinating character to hang out with for a while.
For a while.
Well,
Are you
yeah, I
are
was
you
gonna
like
say if you survive the experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
exactly? Well, the other question though is, what are your thoughts on the new Interview with a Vampire? Have you been
I love
watching
it.
it?
Absolutely love it. I just got through issue 4. I like to binge watch things. So there are very few programs that come out on a weekly episodic schedule that I will actually watch. I'll usually wait until everything's available to binge. But with my love of Interview with the Vampire and all things Anne Rice, I decided to watch this one as close to the release schedule as I could. So I binged the first 2 episodes, and then weekly I've come back for 3 and 4. And I am thoroughly impressed with this show. the changes that they've made, and yes, there are some changes. They make sense within the context of Anne Rice's book. You know, for example, rather than Louis being a slave owner, plantation owner in the 1700s, he's he's essentially a pimp in early 1900s New Orleans. Which, if you think about it, a pimp to a whore and a slave master to a slave, not really that far of a stretch to compare those two. So the changes that they've made make sense. The actor playing Lestat is brilliant. I enjoy the actor playing Louis a lot. I just met Claudia in episode 4, and it's the only time I've been disappointed with any of the choices the show has made. And it's nothing against the young lady who's playing Claudia. Certainly nothing to do with her skin tone. I mean, Louis is he's Creole. Claudia as a Creole woman makes sense. But the actor that they chose to play Claudia is far too old. She's 20. Kirsten Dunst was 11 when she played Claudia, and she was too old. So I knew they were going to make the character older. I just kind of hoped that they would make her look younger, because this whole thing about Claudia is she's a woman's fully developed, brilliant mind trapped inside of a 5-year-old child's body. And this whole struggle with her body image and her self-esteem, and she never ages. She's always a 5-year-old child, and that gets lost when I think in the show they made her 14, and the actor could easily pass for mid-20s. So it loses a lot of that depth and complexity and impact that Claudia's story would have. So,
because in some ways it was really tragic, especially in the books.
Exactly. Yeah. Claudia doesn't have the tragedy. It comes off more as teen angst, like it belongs on My So-Called Life more than it does on Interview with the Vampire.
Yeah. Let it be in Vampire Diaries. Just
not, yeah. Vampire Diaries. That would be another perfectly, the teen angst would belong there.
It was funny though, because when you started describing the show and everything, you could tell you're a comic book person, because you said you're up to issue 4.
Everything comes in issues to me. That means I have a lot of issues.
Oh yeah, that's a whole different story. That's another podcast we'll do.
Don't we all? Don't we all?
Exactly. What fictional character would you like to meet the least?
Lestat.
Okay.
Because
you probably wouldn't survive.
I wouldn't survive it. No. And you walk around the corner and you see that dude waiting for you. The best you can hope for is an entertaining conversation before he drains you dry.
That's true.
Nope, that's very true. What is your favorite geek word, phrase, quote, or pose?
That's a good one.
Retry.
I'm going to go back to Battlestar Galactica, the remake. It's it might even be the finale episode. I'm not exactly sure, but the Cylons, they're on the ship, and they repeat the same thing of all of this has happened before, and before Six can complete the sentence, Apollo jumps in and says, but it doesn't have to happen again. So all of this has happened before, but it doesn't have to happen again. I love that quote. I've never forgotten it.
No, that's awesome. What is your ideal geek occupation?
Man, I'm doing it. I mean, I write comic books for a living. I get to travel to conventions and meet a lot of cool people. I go to stores and sign my books, and I get to hang out with real comic book creators. Like we went to New York Comic Con last year, and I'm sitting there having dinner with Shannon Mayer and Aaron Bartling and Javon Jordan and some other creators that I probably shouldn't name. But it was just so cool. So yeah, man, this is my ideal geek out dream job without hesitation.
Yeah, that's understandable completely. And it's kind of cool when you finally realize, I'm doing what I've always wanted to do.
Yeah. I'm very fortunate that I'm able to do that, because a lot of people, they don't get to. My mom was one of those people. She worked 45 years in the same factory, punching the same time clock every day, hating every moment of it. But it was a stable job. It paid well. It had good benefits, and she was able to, her and dad both working those types of jobs were able to provide for the family that way. And I am so fortunate that I don't have to be one of those people. I actually get to do what I love to do, and I actually get to make money doing it. So I'm so thankful for that every day.
Well, let's look at the other side then. What geek occupation would you not like to do?
Man, I would not want to be a DM on on like one of those live streamed D&D campaigns. That sounds like a lot of work, man. So yeah, that would be my least favorite geek job. I don't think I would do very well. I love telling stories, but I'm just not. I don't have the organization to DM. That requires way too much forethought, and I'm more of I like to have a structure and then wing it from there.
Sure. Yeah, that totally makes sense. All right, Rich, you ready for your final question, the Geek Seat?
Yes.
What is your ultimate geek fantasy?
Wait, is this a mature rated show, or do I have to be careful?
Half and half. Half and half.
I'll just leave that one. I'll leave that one hanging out there. Oh, my biggest geek fantasy. Wow. You know what? Maybe kind of I'll steal something from Sandman, and since we're talking fantasy here, I'd love to just stroll up on like a little pub or a little inn, like hidden somewhere out in the trees, somewhere where it shouldn't be. And then I walk in, and people there like Anne Rice and Stephen King and William Shakespeare and Bram Stoker and Mary Shelley, all these people just being there and giving me the opportunity to converse with them and hear their stories, and just kind of hobnob and rub elbows. That'd be a hell of a fantasy.
That's pretty damn amazing.
That's cool.
That is awesome. Well, Rich Davis, I've got some great news for you, my friend. You've made it through the Geek Seat. Congratulations.
Huzzah, huzzah.
You're one of us now, man. Tell Mike Gordon, tell the young man what he's won.
You have won a lifetime subscription to the ESO network, a value easily worth $68.04.
Woohoo! I will take it.
So,
well, we got some bad news there for that.
Oh man, bait and switch, guys. That's not cool.
Well, it's station currency. So as the closer you get down to earth, the less it is worth. But we appreciate your time so much, especially this time of year. Where can people go to find out more about your books, what you're doing online, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah. First place, if you want to find the books, please go to your local comic book shop, because local comic book shops are the backbone and the soul of our industry. And without the LCS, everything you're going to get is going to be corporate garbage featuring Bat Dude or Spider Guy. So please go to your LCS first. If you want to converse with me, the best way to do that, hit me up on either Facebook or Instagram. It's just Cult of Dracula Comic. There's a Twitter out there, but I don't ever use it. So if you interact with anybody on Twitter, it's probably my publicist or my booking manager, because Twitter terrifies me. So yeah, it's just at Cult of Dracula Comic on everything. And if you hit me up on Instagram and Facebook, it's probably going to be me that replies to you. Because again, if you take the time to talk to me, I definitely want to take the time to talk to you as well.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us this week, and yeah, we'll look for you at a future convention.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right. Take care. Thanks.
Let's take a quick break now, and we will be back, and we are going to be talking all about Black Adam. And we're done.